What we'll do then is we'll move on to the planning applications, and as I say, the first application is for Lidl's. Kirsty, if you'd like to just show us the main plans and just perhaps a brief overview of the application, that would be helpful.
Okay. So just to make members aware that regards to the public comments that have been made, there are over 70 objections, and there were 2 to 3 in favour of the application. The main objections were loss of open space, loss of wildlife, already 3 other supermarkets already in the area, and increased traffic. Everybody, I hope you can see the proposed site plan. The main points to highlight would be that the proposal is for obviously a store with 134 car parking spaces, 6 disabled spaces, 8 parent and child spaces, and the opening times would be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday. And one of the things that I have noted is that where the application is, it is actually in the designated open space within the current local plan.
Okay. Perhaps then we could just address the first question that was raised concerning the in what form this application would affect or either enhance or be to the detriment of the Bronze Age site next door to it. The application site doesn't actually include the historic site itself. It's obviously next door to it. When we at our meeting back in November, we had 3 representatives on behalf of Lidl's present on that occasion. I was somewhat surprised they didn't send anyone this evening, because it was quite a useful sort of question and answer session with them. And they did talk about plans for the heritage site. From what I remember, and perhaps other committee members can add to this, their proposals were to keep an element of public open space there, but to turn it into a much more formal and manufactured space than it is at the moment, featuring sort of things like football kickabout area, that kind of thing. That wouldn't be actually on the site of the historic site itself, but it would be somewhere in the remaining open space that remains after if the store were to be built. They did talk about improving footpath access signage to the Bronze Age site, and really that was pretty much the only thing they could sort of really say about how they were going to enhance what remains of the open space in that area. I can't say that some of us found their answers terribly convincing. Would anyone else like to add to that? I know, Brian, you were there, and Rose, I think you were present at that meeting.
I can't find my hand, Chair. I'm very sad to put up, so if I may speak.
Yeah.
Is it okay to go ahead? Yeah, I have to say I have met Lidl's consultants in my capacity as a city councillor, and I am not impressed by their response. Their proposal to improve this open space, it seems to me more of a tick box exercise to get around planning policy without the detail that would be needed. I understand that it would be in the form of an S106 agreement. Well, we've had that before on this site. Indeed, we had an S106 in place I think when I very first moved to Chelmer Village in 2006, and worked with Councillor Gulliver, who was very helpful when we looked at the original car dealership proposal then, in confirming that the S106 had lapsed, essentially. This has always been intended as open space, as public open space, and that the S106 comes forward with the planning application. If members haven't seen any details from Lidl beyond what they told us, I certainly haven't. It just seems to be an incorporation of all the various suggestions and proposals for open space over the last 35 years, and would in effect, as they've mentioned several aspects, possible formal recreation provision, wildlife zones, public access to parkland and the heritage site. All of the elements, to me, seem to be competing with each other. They're ultimately going to undermine the habitat that's there and ultimately deplete the space. And then I fear it will be degraded even further, seen as wasteland, carved up and sold off. Additionally, Essex County Council, I believe, have responsibility for the public footpath that runs down from Chelmer Village Way. That's where the notice board is. So it's not the informal pathway that people cut through to get directly to Springfield Lions, but rather the one that takes us down towards the river. And that has for some time, it's always been a natural footpath, but you'll probably know it's especially bad in winter. Surely the Essex County Council have responsibility for that, and I would very much like to see them do some improvement work, and not necessarily to put down a hard surface there, but to do something to make sure that it's safe for use in winter. That would not fall to Lidl, presumably being a national public right of way. So that was my concern, really, is the proposals that they've put forward haven't seemingly been thought through enough, and they haven't consulted us in any detail. Just put out queries online when they had the consultation process, which was outside of this planning application. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much for that. When we met with Lidl's at that meeting I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we did ask them was whether their proposals would actually comply with what is known as Policy DN21, which is for protecting community facilities, which is in the current Chelmsford local plan that was approved only last May. And part of that policy, insofar as the loss of community facilities is concerned, says that it has to be shown that these facilities are surplus to requirement, one, and that any loss of open space or such like should be replaced by the equivalent or better in terms of both the quantity and quality of the new provision. And I think this is one area that we felt Lidl's didn't demonstrate, because if there's a net loss in this location of the open space, it can't be replaced there. And their argument that their, if you like, what they termed improvements to the existing, we didn't feel really was an answer to the sort of replacing for quantity or quality of what is already there. So their answer, I think the application seemed to fall down quite considerably insofar as their adherence to that policy in the local plan is concerned. Right, okay, I think so. Hopefully, Mr. Hall, we've answered your question about the effect that the application would have on the Bronze Age the Bronze Age site adjacent to.
Yes, thank you.
The other contributions were really referring to the impact on the local environment and the loss of meadow areas, which Councillor Rosemore has just highlighted. The other thing we did ask them about at that meeting was the impact on traffic volumes, and they did provide some follow-up in details on that. And their view was that the store wouldn't. They had highway surveys done, which seemed to show that the overall volume of traffic wouldn't be greatly increased, because their argument was a lot of the traffic would already be on the road anyway. But we haven't had anything more very concrete from them. I mean, I received as chairman a sort of one sheet of follow-up answers to the questions we put to them. As I say, I'm surprised they aren't here with us tonight. We could have asked them these various things. So there hasn't really been an awful lot more forthcoming from them. As far as any possible highways impact traffic volumes and also road safety is concerned, insofar as traffic exiting from the proposed site onto a busy road, I was a little bit surprised there were no comments this time around as part of this application from the Highways Authority, Kirsty. There was nothing from them, from what I remember.
Regards to on the Consultees, Chairman, is that what you're...
The highways, ECC Highways hadn't sent any comments in. I mean, they're asked for views on the road safety and traffic implications.
Not as yet, no. When I checked the comments, when I printed them out today, as of yet, there wasn't, no, Chairman. Chairman, just to let you know, there is, I don't know if you can see that there is a member of the public who has raised their hand.
Yes, by all means, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. It was just in relation to the point that was raised there to do with the traffic reports. Would they be accessible to the public to see what the envisaged change with the 186, wasn't it, parking spaces or whatever, what is foreseeable? Because I suppose my concern there is, like, if we've got wildlife that is in this meadow area, then we're going to end up with islands of wildlife that's just not going to be able to travel. It's just going to be squashed on the roads, whether it be hedgehogs through to badgers to newts, whatever that's going to be. And I appreciate that's more the creatures rather than the actual change, if you like, with the flora that will be there also.
I think as part of there's a lot of documents that have been submitted as part of this application, and I think is there anything, Kirsty, from them on the actual results of their highways sort of investigations? Do you know?
There is detail in a report regards to some different assessments that are available online, but I don't have the exact detailed information I'll be able to quote at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take a look.
Okay, so I mean, if you go into the Chelmsford City Council website and onto the planning portal, look up the number of this application, and then you can go into a section where it says about plans and documents, and if you just click on the links there, you'll be able to see the actual site plan that we saw earlier, plus a lot of other detail that really is too excessive to sort of go through line by line or replicate at this meeting. But there is a lot of real detail there if you would like to look at it in that way.
Sure, I'll look to the traffic side. I didn't see the proposed changes to the traffic. I'm just aware they're very busy roads around that area, and it's quite impactful, I'm sure, for residents too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the other committee members like to add anything at this point? I know, Anthony, you weren't at the meeting with Lidl, but I don't believe, I'm not sure. And Brian, would you like to add
any comments at this point?
No, only other than I did actually have a look at the stuff that went out on that that Kirsty sent out to us, and I don't think they responded very well to the traffic which was raised just now. Because I think, as you sort of may have pointed out, we did suggest that if there were entrances to a car park, there should be no right turns, but they clearly haven't entertained any of that. So there doesn't seem to have been a lot. To me, not a lot of thought put into the amount of traffic that's going to be in and out of that site onto what is already a busy road. But there you go. That was what I've noticed on that. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anthony, would you like to say anything at this point?
Yeah. Looking at what was said earlier about the traffic and what Brian said about the right turn coming out from the Lidl supermarket, they haven't really given much thought other than what they said. The highways shows that there wasn't going to be that much more traffic. In some ways, I suppose I can see what they mean, because looking around at some of the supermarkets like Asda and the roundabouts and Sainsbury's, and even at the Army and Navy where they have Lidl, the only problem where there was a lot of traffic congestion is probably at the Tesco roundabout coming up from Wood Street when the school breaks up. So from that perspective, I don't think the traffic is of much concern when they say there's going to be a higher volume of people using Lidl, even though there's like 147 car parking spaces. I don't think it's going to add that much to it. Looking at all the other supermarkets around in Chelmsford and how much congestion it causes, to the best of my memory, the only problem or time that I've had trouble was at Wood Street roundabout, where Tesco's, the planning wasn't really given much thought about cars of shoppers coming out and school traffic from the Princess Road. Yeah, but otherwise, all the other roundabouts at Sainsbury's or even at Asda or Army and Navy, I don't think it has caused that much of a traffic congestion.
Right.
May I speak to that, Chair? Sorry.
Yeah.
I would. The key word there is roundabouts, and in terms of this junction, I am deeply concerned about the junction being so close to the roundabout. Now, I saw the comments that came back. Kirsty kindly shared those with me from Lidl, and they claim that traffic decelerates on approach to the roundabout at Coutton Hall Lane. Well, yes, it does, but I can tell you, living so close to that roundabout, I see it not decelerating until the last minute. And in fact, obviously, coming the other direction from Coutton Hall Lane, it accelerates when it comes off of that roundabout towards what will be the T-junction, where cars are coming in and out, and as are lorries, presumably 4 times a day with 2 deliveries, so they're in and they're out. It's a much narrower road than Coutton Hall Lane in terms of the provision for entrance and exit. And we have seen traffic congestion due to the Montessori nursery, and until recently, and I know now there's a traffic order in process on Coutton Hall Lane, because we had car transporters on one side of the road, people dropping off children to the nursery on the other side. And I'm deeply concerned that this T-junction severs the cycle path and the footpath entirely. So you're riding around the corner, and then you have to be aware that there's this junction. It just doesn't seem like a sensible approach to me to have a T-junction in that way, especially not with the lay-by and the bus stop so close, moved closer to Coutton Hall Lane roundabout. It doesn't seem thought through, and I am deeply concerned, having seen people trying to get across that road safely on foot and on bikes as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Rose.
But I think we've had a pretty good sort of discussion about all the various aspects now. I mean, I'm getting very much the impression that, as Kirsty rightly said, there were, of the 70 or 80 responses on the City Council website, there were 2 or 3 in favour of the application. Having looked at those, I think I'd have to say they were sort of pretty much written on, say, self-interested lines. The individuals concerned either walked that way to work or lived on the doorstep, or sort of comments of that sort. So taking into account the vast majority that have objected to this application and the comments that have been made tonight, I think it's pretty clear that we'd like to submit an objection to this application on behalf of the Parish Council. So, I mean, Kirsty, I've made a few notes here, and I'm sure you have. So, shall we just go through the various points we'd like to include in the objection? First of all, if we look at the open space element, which is quite a significant one, and it's been mentioned by a lot of people in their submissions. Perhaps there's 2 different parts to this. One is the actual value of the habitat that's been referred to both tonight and by responses to the application. So it's wrong to sort of, as perhaps Liberals have done, refer to this as a wasteland, unkempt area of land and so on and so forth. So it's the concern about the loss of what in flora and fauna terms is seen as a very valuable wildlife habitat. It's an area that's used quite heavily for recreation, walking and various dog walking, but people sort of getting exercise, particularly which we need to at the moment. So that's one part of the open space element, I think. Another part is, and we haven't mentioned this term tonight, and I know we did when we looked at the previous applications for this site that Susan mentioned earlier. The term buffer zone has been used quite a lot about this area, and in some ways, quite aside from the value of the habitat, it does provide this gap, quite a clear distinction between the industrial areas of Springfield Dukes and the residential part of Chelmer Village. That was quite a deliberate intention or idea of the Section 106 agreement that was dating from the 1990s or 80s or 90s when this area was first laid out. And as we said, when we looked at the care home application, if either that or this were to be agreed, that Section 106 agreement couldn't in fact be fulfilled. So if we our first objection is concerning the open space. One I think is the value of the habitat in all the various ways that have been mentioned, and the other is the function that it fulfills as this buffer zone, which was a quite deliberate planning intention when the area was laid out. Another point or another objection or comment that we made, and it has been made again tonight, we made it last time, is as far as the traffic is concerned. So the concerns there seem to be traffic volume, the increase out onto a very busy road, the points that Rose just made recently about the proximity of the T-junction access to the roundabout and the effect that would have on the cycle path and the footpath. And the point that we made before that they haven't really addressed, that we feel the plan, if it's going to go ahead, that it shouldn't include any right turn out of the proposed Lidl site onto the main road, and that wasn't really sort of taken up in any great detail by Lidl's. as far as the planning policy is concerned, I mean, as I mentioned, another objection or point would be that it doesn't seem to conform to the very recently agreed section within the current local plan, which is this policy DM21. It doesn't seem, the proposals don't seem to meet the requirement of replacing any lost open space by the equivalent or better in terms of quantity or quality. So it doesn't seem to satisfy a policy that was only agreed last May, which seems to be quite a sort of major objection, I would have thought, to what they're proposing. One of the points we made previously when we looked at the care home application is, I don't know whether the policy number has changed, but there was at the time what was known as Planning Policy DC4, which is to safeguard the residential amenity of nearby properties, whereby there should be no excessive noise, activity and vehicle movements. Perhaps that, I think that could be included as one of our objections in terms of the planning policy element of this application. And another aspect of the habitat itself, we haven't so much mentioned tonight, but was before, was about there was some TPO trees on the site that didn't seem to be adequately protected in the current plans. As Kirsty mentioned, also one of the main comments and really objections that residents have made in responding to their responses to the City Council is the adequate, you could say, or almost over provision of similar sorts of food stores in the nearby area. So I think perhaps some comment along those lines could be included, but we just don't see that there's any need at all for this additional provision, and certainly not at the expense of losing the site we talked about at some length. So perhaps that's another point we could include. I hope I've summarised most of those. Is there any, Kirsty or anyone else you'd like to add in to that?
I haven't, Chairman.
Rose? Yeah, Rose would like to add something, I believe.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I'd muted myself twice. Just a note about the TPOs that you mentioned. In our initial conversations with Rapley's, the consultants for Lidl's and Fieldcent Associates, they were unable to clarify the detail of which trees, hedgerow and scrubland might be retained. I was told that they were in the business of building supermarkets, and they basically shrugged off in that meeting, and actually my previous meeting in September, both times. They mentioned that they were thinking of retaining trees, and I've since learned that all trees, apart from the one veteran oak that's directly in front of the CHP building as you go along Chunga Village Way, you can see this magnificent oak, that will be boxed in by development, but will be retained. However, it's very painful to learn that they're going to fell both of the ash trees, one of which has suffered through drought in the last couple of years, but the one to the front is perfectly healthy and has been given 40 plus years life expectancy by the people who carried out the tree survey for Lidl. So that will be cut to the ground and the stump will be poisoned, and there will also be scouring all of the habitat that's underneath that tree, which I think is unacceptable. This whole area has been sort of rewilding over the years, and has been largely left to it, and is all the more beautiful and resilient for that, and it offers this seasonal landscape, which will just be lost and sealed over. So I'm very disappointed also by the landscaping plans, which do look more akin to a car dealership, with beautiful though they are, species like Ceanothus, which we don't find anywhere else on that site, it's just not in keeping. It just looks like it's been plonked as a cut and paste design. In fact, I know that the store itself is a design I think lifted from somewhere else in the country, and just put forward as a unit, as a retail unit. So I'm very disappointed for all their talk of working with the community and working on the environment in the space next door. For all that, it's still in isolation, essentially a retail unit that has just been landed upon the people of Chelmer Village and the residents who love that and respect that space for what it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In addition to the points I went through, are there just any more outstanding, or is everyone quite happy with that as the basis for our objection?
Chairman, there is a member of the public that would like to add something.
Yeah.
Hi there. Just one very short comment following on from what Rose has just shared. Ash trees, I know from my experience with working with the National Trust a number of years back, they were quite rare to actually have them within Essex. I know they're one of our native trees, but to find healthy ones is quite rare. So to know that it's got a 45-year life, I'm very happy to see that living out its lifespan.
Okay, yeah. Right, thanks very much. So I think we've come to the end of this particular item. So as I mentioned, we'll put an objection forward, and it will come forward to the City Council in quite a short space of time. One thing that was done when we considered the care home application, we did ask that because of the level of interest and controversy that this had generated within the local neighbourhood, that the application should be referred to the City Council full planning committee for consideration by City Councillors, and that is as opposed to what otherwise happens, which is a report being decided by planning officers at the City Council on the basis of current planning policy. Do people present, fellow committee members and our visitors on the council feel that would be worthwhile this time? Yeah.
Chairman, just to point out, my understanding is that as Springfield Parish Council, we can't actually ask for it to actually be called in. What we need to do is write to the ward members, I believe, in City Council, and say that obviously Springfield Parish Council would like it to be called in, and then one of those members need to call that in.
Yeah. Yes, that's fine.